With the addition of Rossi and Tang, Arknights Endfield have seen one of the first changes in the meta. Rossi being one of the surprising one for me because a lot of people did assume her just to be like a mixed bag and master of none, and it turns out she's just a master of everything that she does, and her damage output on both physical and the heat element side are incredible, and instead of just being subpar on both, she is excelling in both. Therefore, combining both of them sees Rossi to be one of the best characters in the game. But before we jump right in though, today we'll be taking a look at Pritwin's tier list. They've also added the team tier list, which I think is really helpful, so I do think we can have a really good discussion referring to Pritwin's tier list. Of course, I would prefer this to be a discussion video. Do let me know what you think, and I'll let you know as well if I do agree or disagree with all these rankings. TLDR though, they seems quite fair to me. In any case, let's just jump right in, and we'll start with the character tier list. Do remember as well with character tier lists, they are really much not too important because the value of each character really does depend on the team that you're putting them in. So ranking each character based on just tiers aren't exactly the easiest thing, but in any case, let's just dive right in with tier 0. These are the strongest characters in the whole of Arknights Endfield up to version 1.1. To take a look at the new addition and changes, we do see Rossi as the new addition in tier 0 as one of the best damage dealers in the game. As I mentioned at the start of the video, Rossi is that one character that we thought she was going to be a mixed bag. Not exactly too strong because she does too many things, not a master of anything. However, it turns out she's just really good at both things, right? She's just really good at as a physical damage dealer, and she does really high heat damage as well, making her just a really strong character. She's not going to out damage a pure physical crush character like Endmin going full crazy, and she's not going to out damage 1v1 versus a Levitine in terms of just heat damage, but when you combine both of them together, she can go toe to toe with any tier 0 DPS, if not overtake them. That is one thing I'm also curious by. I wonder if the perfectly played Rossi team versus the perfectly played Levitine team, who will do the more damage, right? That is something I'll love to know, and in my opinion, I actually think Rossi does better in single target scenarios for sure, but Levitine simply does way better in AoE situations with her swinging blade, and that is one of the issues with Rossi if there is any. In an AoE situation, she's not exactly the person that could clear a bunch of mobs that's in multiple angles easily, but honestly, since her team usually has a gilberta, at least you have the gather, at least that's still manageable. But still, that just goes to show how Levitine is still very strong all around. Single target, multi-target, she's still the goat with all of those. But I wonder who is the highest damage dealer though. That is something I would love to know. Do let me know if you do. So yep, Rossi tier 0, a really worthy character to pull for anyone that's just coming in. I do have a video that shows you every single team that I think most people would think of. They're well teams, they're free to play teams. Feel free to check it out and you'll know what to do with a Rossi that you just gotten. To move on from Rossi, we do see Yvonne as well being increased from tier 0.5 to tier 0. In Pritwin's opinion, now that a lot more people has min-maxed the rotation of Yvonne teams, and not to mention with the addition of Tang as well as one of the best cryo characters, Yvonne's team has certainly seen improvements, and now that it is stabilized, she can be considered a tier 0 damage dealer, and I personally do agree as well. She's incredibly strong, her damage output is ridiculously good, and with the addition of Tang making her team even better, especially with a time slot that solves her problem with like boss moving around too much, and Tang herself just being really good as a cryo inflictor and cryo damage booster, it makes Yvonne actually really strong and enough to be called a tier 0 character in my opinion. And that will be the big 3 of the current meta of Arknights Endfield. For anyone who's gotten their Rossi, the doubt is over. She's really strong. To move on from the damage dealers, we're gonna take a look at the enablers now, which as I mentioned before, it's going to be Tang. Tang is a really specialist type of character where she's usually and only pretty much going to be using in cryo teams. With the addition of Yvonne and with the availability of Flash Right anyway, Tang's value is actually still quite high in this meta. Tang's pretty simple and straightforward, right? As long as your team deals cryo damage, Tang is always going to be very much valuable and usable. Not only does she provide all the inflictions, she also provides really good damage output, especially with her skill and with her ultimate as well. Like if you have a well-built Tang, her damage is actually good enough to just one-shot a lot of mobs, and that can actually be a really good solution to some of the characters where they can be a bit clunky when they aren't in their damage window like Lash Ride. You can still rely on Tang to dish out a lot of damage on the boss or on just any little mobs and clear them. And not to mention the final thing that really nips it in the bud, we got Tang's ultimate with the time stop effect, giving you so much versatility and option. If you think the boss is about to move, you can set it up so they can't move anymore and have Yvonne finish them the moment the time stop happens and they're forced to just stand there, right? It does solve an issue with Yvonne's ultimate where if the boss is just jumping around, it doesn't get easy. And of course, Tang gives you the option as well to just end the ultimate prematurely in order to get you more debuffs on the enemy, increasing your damage further, and that'll allow someone like Lash Ride to burst out damage incredibly well. A worthy tier 0 character in my opinion. We got Tang at that tier. Next off, we do see the buffers, and these are the tier 0 buffers in the opinion of Pritwin. Firstly, we do see gilberta, and secondly, we do see Pogra. I won't be spending too much time on these two because we all know how good they are. are. Specifically with Gilberta though, I do think she got benefited a lot by the recent characters that got released. The past 2 characters that are released are Rossi, Tang Tang, and Yvonne. All of these characters are actually part of the teams where they might want to use Gilberta too. For instance, with Rossi, she's actually really good with Gilberta, considering Rossi's entire kit revolves around getting her combo to activate. In order to do that, you need Gilberta's Infliction or Gilberta's Lift as well. As long as both happens on the enemy, you get to activate Rossi and you get to do a bunch of damage. And Gilberta herself is able to provide both of those effects, making her really good for Rossi. And not to mention for something like Yvonne plus Tang Tang, you'll still see Gilberta being used in that team, not only just because of the gather that really helps Yvonne and Rossi both in AoE situations. Obviously, Yvonne does consume Nature Infliction and turns them into solidification alongside Crime Infliction as well. So Gilberta is a no-brainer for an Yvonne team. And Gilberta's ultimate, obviously, fully covering both Rossi's and Yvonne's ultimate duration as well. It makes Gilberta just the best option for these 2 teams. And considering these 2 teams are the tier 0 characters, it's no wonder Gilberta's right here. And I'm really happy to see her being at the tier of the best. A lot of people had their doubts at the start where Gilberta could have felt a little bit more awkward to use. Back when we only had Lashright and Levitine to work with, right? They're not exactly the most intuitive, but now it got more intuitive. And we do see a little slight switch in the meta where it's now more about Art's reaction or landing physical status as well as Infliction. There are more things that has to deal with putting on Art's Infliction, and that just means Gilberta's ability to do that is really much valuable. To move on from her, we do see Pogra as well at tier 0. There's not much to say about Pogra really. He's just really valuable for any physical team, providing the physical team with SP return and being a character that is able to provide breach as well. It makes him really unique, and the sustainless physical team is still one of the best teams in terms of damage output in the whole game, which easily makes Pogra a really valuable character. And yep, it's not just a capability to increase your damage ceiling, it's that really good SP return as well. And every single team in the game does love more SP, and the more SP you have, the more aggressive you can be, and you know, you get to clear things faster essentially, which is why Pogra is at tier 0, and I do think that is fairly convincing. And ladies and gentlemen, that is the tier 0 characters. I'll have to say I do agree with pretty much all of them. To take a look at the team tier list though from Britland, we do see tier 0 featuring pretty much all the tier 0 characters, right? All of the main DPS from tier 0 are basically the best characters of the whole game, and we do see that in their team there are a couple of options, and most of them will include the tier 0 supports as well. We do see Tang Tang feature in the Yvonne hypercarry team. We do see stuff like Gilberta and Pogra Nishtik and a couple of different teams as well, not to mention Levitine Heat team, which actually can still have Gilberta in there. It's not exactly too intuitive, but it's still a valid team to be used. Just goes to show how good Gilberta has been, right? Now to take a look at the next tier, we do see a Lashright in tier 0.5. I personally have ranked Lashright at tier 0 before, but I will say, and even right now, I do still think Lashright is incredibly strong for the raw damage output that she can bring, but I will say she's certainly a little bit more clunky compared to the better characters. A generic team of Lashright usually would require to use a lot of final hits in order to get Lashright's skill to activate, and with more bosses being able to interrupt you a lot, it might not be the easiest thing to do unless you're really skilled. However though, if you're really skilled, I do actually think Lashright is still qualified to be a tier 0 team. She's got a pretty high ceiling in my opinion. But generally though, her being tier 0.5 is fair. She has her issues, especially against multi-target situations, but actually with the addition of Tang Tang, and if you have a Gilberta on this team as well, her AoE capabilities does get help a lot. The one thing that there's no doubt about Lashright is her single target capabilities. She's still one of the strongest single target damage dealers. I would actually still position her in tier 0, maybe a lower tier 0, but tier 0.5, you know what, is still quite fair in my opinion. Do let me know what you think though. To move on from the damage dealer slot, we do see the enablers at tier 0.5. We do see Li Feng, Chen Qianyu, and Wolfguard. Chen and Li Feng, there's nothing too much to say about them. They are the physical stars, and they are the characters that actually land a lot of the physical statuses and a lot of the debuffs as well in order to help the physical team shine. Physical team being one of the best teams as well means, well, the supports that are going to be in those teams will be really good characters that's considered high tier, and I think that is totally fair. As for Wolfguard, ever since Levitine got added, Wolfguard has always got a slot in the meta to be used as a heat inflictor in a Levitine heat team, and now then with the addition of Rossi, he got even more valuable, providing Rossi with very valuable arts infliction and even combustion that Rossi is able to take advantage of too. You also get freedom in that team where if you want Wolfguard to consume the combustion with his skill in order to get a lot of damage output out, you absolutely could. And not to mention with one of his potentials, you actually have a heat damage buff for your main damage dealer. So Levitine and Rossi both are going to get a lot of help from Wolfguard. So I'm happy to see him at tier 0.5. I think it's really valuable. Maybe not tier 0 type valuable, but still incredibly strong. And to move on from those, we do see the buffer slot now at tier 0.5. We do see the similar characters, honestly, specifically the common ones like Akikuri, Perlika, and Zaihi. These are the characters that's just always a staple in a lot of different teams, and they usually do just one one thing very well, which is increasing your damage output. The person I like to focus on though would be Ardelia, where in Pritman's opinion, she has seen a drop of a tier. Now I will say you'll have to take notice of the meta right now, where it's a lot more arts infliction and even physical status infliction. For Rossi's or Yvonne's case, you just got to get that infliction on, get that physical status on, get their combos in order to get more energy, continue with their skills as well, and ultimately get their ultimate off to do the most damage. That seems to be the case for the recent characters, which Ardelia herself, one of the things that she can't do is basically landing any sort of infliction. What she is unique for is able to forcibly land corrosion, which currently there are not a lot of characters that has a lot to do with corrosion. I'm not saying there isn't, there are definitely some characters who utilize those, and in the future there might be characters that would like those as well. But for now, Ardelia isn't able to be the best option for Rossi, not the best option for Yvonne either. Again though, it's not that you cannot use them together, it's just that it might be less intuitive and you might have to work around some things, right? A good solution that people has also figured out though is just to use gilberta with Ardelia both in the same team. Then not only you still get the infliction from gilberta, you're also not wasting Ardelia's susceptibility that is still very valuable, right? So just have both in one team and you'll still do very well. But in any case though, Ardelia is still a really strong buffer, one of the best for say Levitate, not exactly the best if she's the solo buffer for say an Yvonne or Rossi team compared to especially gilberta. So having her at tier 0.5 is honestly fair just because of how good gilberta would be for the recent teams in my opinion. That will change at P1 though for Ardelia because that does increase the susceptibility for Ardelia. And I will also say one of the other things that she might be a little bit more clunky with, it's just with the way you get her susceptibility, right? You have to land her combo and then use 1 SP with her skill in order to consume the corrosion into susceptibility. It's a really long duration, but you will basically be spending that SP just for the susceptibility. And again, there are no inflictions whatsoever, so it might be considered costly at times to keep that up in the long term if you're using a team that really would prefer inflictions. Let's not forget though, Ardelia's healing is actually one of the best ones in the game as well. So while I do get why she would be at tier 0.5, I still think she's in the really high of tier 0.5. I wouldn't even be mad if she was in tier 0 even. I do think the survivability card of her kit is also quite crucial and quite valuable too. Let me know what you think though. As for the team tier list at 0.5, we do see only Last Right Hyper Carry. It just goes to show how most of the tier 0 teams still include the tier 0.5 buffers and tier 0.5 enablers, and there still isn't as many teams in the game so far. But yep, tier 0.5 though, we do see Last Right. If you played it perfectly, I still think this team can be at tier 0 though. In any case, generally tier 0.5 seems fair to me. And to move forward to the rest of the tiers, we do see tier 1. I won't be spending too much time with these because they are kind of the same as before. But to start with Aviweta, pretty much nothing has changed with Aviweta. She has been at that level at the start, and right now she's still at around that level, right? You just do a bunch of damage and that's it. That's pretty much it for her team. You put a lot of Thunder Lances on the ground, do a bunch of damage. That's really it. Is it enough damage to justify higher tiers? Not exactly. Is it cool to see though? Absolutely. As for Japan and Enmin though, they're considered tier 1. I will say with the addition of Rossi and when they are played in the Rossi team, they suddenly become like higher tiers to me. It's what I've been saying, right? Character tiers doesn't really mean too much because it's more important with the team tiers. It's more important where the characters work in a team. But to just rank them both individually, Japan and physical Enmin, their entire shtick is to just land the crush, and it's really still dependent on the rest of the team that can consistently land your physical status for Japan and Enmin to shine. So tier 1 seems fair to me because alone or in a bad team, they're completely worthless. I mean, that is just the case for most people though. So I was trying to just say like Japan and Enmin, no matter what tiers they are, it doesn't matter as much because an Enmin team used with a sustainless physical team with Pokra, Defang, that team's tier 0. But then if you're using Enmin with like some randos, then of course you're not going to be performing as well. Generally though, I would say Enmin's damage output you'll probably see to be around tier 1's level for general players and general gameplay, right? And Japan is very similar to Enmin as well with just landing the crush. In any case though, let's just move on to the enablers. These are always ranked around the same area, but two pairs I like to point out that is important would definitely be Alesh and Amber. Tang has pretty much replaced Alesh in most teams, be able to actually return SP, do a lot more damage than Alesh, and inflict cryo infliction really well compared to Alesh as well, making him less of a best choice for those teams. But Alesh can actually still be used in most cryo teams anyway, so tier 1 seems fair to me. And as for Amber, Amber is one of the weird cases where she is lower tier if you're just measuring like how much damage output a team can do, because Amber's main shtick is either quickly inflict stagger on the boss or just providing you with really good healing and protection, and those are the things that may not be able to be measured in terms of their value, because you would love for an Amber to be in your team, especially in the current Umbral Monument where the boss are hitting you really hard and there's a lot of damage output going on. Amber suddenly becomes really good there for the survivability. But if you're just trying to like nuke a boss quickly though, there are definitely better options for Amber. Her main shtick offensively is to either stagger the boss quick or to inflict physical status as well. So yep, obviously physical status. There are a lot of different physical characters that's really much more offensive, like Pogranishnik and Leafog, that might just take Amber's slot. With all that considered though, I still think she's fair at tier 1, I suppose. She does lack offensive supports, while she does have really good defensive ones. But I mean, as I said though, individual character rankings, it's hard to really make sense of because it more matters what the team is. In any case, Amber being here is not that crazy. I don't think I'll be losing my mind about it. And that'll be it. Next up, we do see the buffer in tier 1 in Antal. I personally still think Antal is strong. Maybe not as strong and as valuable as stuff like Akikuri that just does a lot of things, even as a 4-star. But he's still a valuable option and a character that's very utilized in different nuke teams specifically. Something like a levitating single target team usually has an Antal on them. But overall, seeing him in tier 1 is not that crazy to me. I do agree as well. And from there, we do see tier 1.5 and tier 2, which as I said though, characters value are really different based on the team that they're in. For instance, like Fluorite, she's considered tier 1.5 because she lacks like buffing capabilities for a team to do more damage, but her inflictions are incredibly consistent. So using her in an Avant team or a Last Right team is not even that bad of an experience. So instead of talking about characters individually, let's just move on to the team list, where we'll start with tier 1. These are teams that features a lot of the lower tier characters, like the Aviwena Hyper Carry. Now, Endmin Physical as well is considered tier 1 if you're not running the physical sustainless team, and same with Dapan as well. I do think these are like the standard teams that most people have access to, so they're not exactly the strongest ever, unless you're just ditching defensive abilities completely, getting rid of the Amber or Ardelia and putting another physical character in. If you can play that team well, you see really high ceiling enough to consider it tier 0. Regardless though, tier 1 seems fair for all of these teams. Let's just move on to the next slot. With tier 1.5, the cryo / physical hybrid. I'll be honest, I don't know anyone that really uses this team that much. It was fun at the start especially, but against boss fights or tougher fights, it's not exactly the most consistent one and high tempo one for sure. But well, it does exist. One thing I will note though is take a look at Fluorite, right? While she's considered to be a lower tier character individually, she's still really valuable in like a lot of strong teams as well. Featured even in a tier 0 team in Avant Hyper Carry, where Fluorite does so much infliction that it helps out Avant so easily. It's actually a really fun team that I've tried before, and I do use Fluorite to clear daily stuff with Avant if I'm playing Avant. Same with Flash Ride. But in any case though, it just goes to show that character tiers itself is really dependent on the team that they're playing. But overall, I do agree with this list pretty much for the most part. If not maybe 1 or 2, then I would move slightly up or down. But generally speaking though, I think these are pretty on point. I had pretty much forgot about Catcher entirely. I do think he's not good. So tier 2 baby. I don't even think he's featured in any team at all. There's not a Catcher. Damn bro. Is bro just a Yan Ching of Arknights Endfield? Everybody just does not like the guy. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is the updated meta of Arknights Endfield in version 1.1. I do think we're heading into a very interesting direction where there's gonna be more different things, like a combination of physical and heat damage output like Rossi, right? That is such a fun idea, and I do look forward to more like this with more different teams being introduced in the game. I'll be covering all of it on the channel. Do follow along if you like that. If you guys enjoyed, and feel free to discuss what you think about the meta right now, and take care.